the two coffins of Simone Veil and that of her husband, which are now there, and they will be carried the last part of that route to the Panthéon. There you go. That is the scene for what will be her final journey, Simone Veil's final journey from that intersection up to the Panthéon, where her coffin will be entombed, making her the 5th woman ever to be entombed at the Panthéon. Well, here with me in the studio, I'm joined by Anne Macy, who is Chief Executive of the Confrontations Europe think tank. I'm also joined by Sophie Janinet, who is an independent journalist, author, and member of the Georgette Sand Collective. Thank you to you both for coming in to talk to us. Let me start with you, Sophie. Just looking at the scene there at the Panthéon, I'm sure a lot of memories are coming back of Simone Veil throughout the course of your life. What did she mean to you personally?
Well, as a kid, because, well, I was pretty young when the Simone Veil law was passed. She was quite a symbol. You know, as a young girl, we need models to think that we can achieve things, and to see this woman facing the entire parliament and standing up and raising a voice while being under attack and not letting go, as they say in the US, yet she persisted, was a great thing to see as a kid, because it really gave me the impression that it was a possibility to be a woman and to stand in front of those men, because most of them were men, and to be at the initiative of such a great law.
Can I put the same question to you, Anne? When you were growing up, what did the name Simone Veil mean to you?
To me, it embodies the miracle of Europe. Actually, she was raised by her dad, who was a prisoner during the World War I, and he hated the Germans, the hereditary enemy, and didn't believe in reconciliation. And then she and her whole family experienced concentration camps, meant to exterminate them because they were Jews. And she lost her dad, her mom, her brother, and she was able to overcome this and request not revenge, but cooperation. So to me, she really embodies this greatest cause, Europe, that still deserves that we fight for it. And now I believe that we can be proud to be European, not because we were born on European soil, not because we were born from European parents, but because we have been able to achieve great things together, to unite, to cooperate, to forge the 3 great: peace, liberty, and prosperity, despite our bloody history of mutual destruction.
Indeed, she did, and she managed, didn't she, to convert what must have been an incredible trauma, the experience she had at Auschwitz, into incredible ambition, burning ambition, politically, but also for this greater cause that she believed in so strongly, Europe. And there must be a lot of people wishing perhaps there were more people like her in the sort of field of European politics, particularly at this moment.
Definitely, including women.
Tell me a bit more about what you thought about Simone Veil as you were growing up, and how her image really evolved, you know, as she had various different roles throughout the decades of our youth, you know, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even latterly. Do you think her character evolved at the same time as her political career?
Well, as a human being, obviously you evolve when you grow up, when you age. That's the most natural thing. So she started with, you know, this tragic history of hers escaping the camps, and then she arrived in France and realized that she had a baccalaureate, which was quite a surprise, because she was one of the only few young Jewish in Paris who had the time to actually take the exam, and so it gave her the opportunity to go study at university, political science, and then law, and then she became a magistrate, which for women at the time, just that was already like massive. It was so impressive, and she started her combat for women, even if she wasn't really putting a name on it, which is kind of ironic, but she had this this particularity of being really engaged in women's history, like women's life very quickly. She asked for Algerian women who were tortured and raped in prison to be brought back to France because she was a magistrate and she could ask that, and she was very sensitive to the issue. So there was a lot of things that she did all through her life, her career, for women mostly. That's what I'm most interested in, obviously, but also for unity and acceptance. She was one of the only one who were saying that May 68 wasn't an abomination. She was actually supporting those young people in the street, saying that things should change. She was really, in her time, she was really modern, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There we're just seeing the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy, who's there, and that is the scene at the Panthéon right now. And just going back to this political dimension to her life in particular, and she supported Nicolas Sarkozy in his candidacy back in 2008. When there is a decision to bury someone or entomb someone at the Panthéon, there's usually quite a lot of debate surrounding it, and there's usually quite a lot of back and forth, and sometimes some hesitation, as we've seen with previous presidents. With her, there was no hesitation, was there? Because everyone was absolutely clear she should be buried at the Panthéon. There was no debate, was there?
Actually, the two main causes that were at least abortion and Holocaust memory don't mean unanimity still in our country. It is not this cause that really helped choose her, but it was more her strength of character, what she has been able to do to unite the different people.
Do you think she did bridge that political divide successfully?
Yeah, to a large extent. Actually, she was a precursor in the fact that she was neither right nor left platforms, but maybe both. And she was more of a pragmatic. She cared about the people. She cared about the people who suffer. And that was why she was fighting in politics. And probably that's also why she forced the admiration of the people.
Okay, well, that is the scene inside the Panthéon right now. And of course, as she's laid to rest there at the Panthéon, Simone Veil joins the ranks of Victor Hugo, Voltaire, and several other of the most important figures in French history. Of course, Simone Veil was the first woman president of the European Parliament. And as France 24's Anke Oehler now explains, she was a woman of many firsts.
Trained in law, Simone Veil began her career as a magistrate in the French prison system, the start of her life's fight for women's rights. She campaigned for better women's prison conditions and defended the treatment of incarcerated women. In the 1960s, she officially entered the government, serving as a technical counselor for the Justice Ministry, the first woman to do so. And in 1974, President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing chose her as his health minister. During that time, she improved access to contraception for women and undertook a long, hard-fought battle to legalize abortion.
How many of you are ready to take on this fight to help women in distress?
The law legalizing abortion passed in 1975 and was named in her honor. La Loi Veil, her legacy. But France was only the beginning. Veil took her skills and optimism to Europe in 1979. And was elected the first president of the newly convened European Parliament. A Holocaust survivor, she pushed for reconciliation among member states after the war, saying a strong Europe was the only way to prevent such a tragedy from reoccurring.
35 years ago, I thought Europe was indispensable, that if our parents had made the effort to construct it, we would not have witnessed the catastrophe we experienced. Today, I think the same thing, and my feelings are even stronger than before.
In the 90s, Veil returned to French politics, first as social affairs minister, then for 9 years on the Constitutional Council, the nation's highest constitutional authority. In 2010, when she received the honor of becoming an immortal at the Académie Française, she put 4 symbols on her ceremonial sword: her identification number from the concentration camp, the face of a smiling woman, and the mottos of France and the European Union, symbols that defined her extraordinary life.
Okay, I look back at the life of Simone Veil. And for the benefit of those of you who are just tuning in here on France 24, we're keeping a very close eye on events at the Panthéon today, where exactly 1 year after her death at the age of 89, Simone Veil is being given the rare honour of a burial there. She becomes the 5th woman ever to be buried at the monument, and she'll be laid to rest alongside her husband Antoine. Well, Simone Veil was, of course, a Holocaust survivor, a women's rights icon, former health minister twice over, and a one-time president of the European Parliament. And not only was she one of the most important figures in 20th century French politics, she was also one of France's most popular and trusted public figures. Let's go back to France 24's Anke Uller, who's standing by for us at the Panthéon. That is the scene leading up to the Panthéon, the blue carpet leading the way. And Anke, just tell us what's going to be happening in the next 10 minutes or so.
Well, in the next 10 minutes, Tom, we're expecting the coffins of Simone and Antoine Veil to come out of their motorcade, and they will be carried around, down this blue carpet. Blue, of course, representing Europe, representing peace, the United Nations, all values that Simone Veil stood for. All along this carpet, there are 21 posters with photos of Simone Veil that represent key points in her life. So her adolescence in the southern town of Nice, being sent to the Auschwitz concentration camp in 1944 at the age of 16, when she became health minister in France, when she passed La Loi Veil, legalizing abortion in 1975, all the way through to her death. They will be stopping 3 times at key points during the procession. They'll be stopping at La Loi Veil to have a song. There will be a choir singing, very symbolic of her fight for women's rights. They'll be stopping 2 more times, once when she becomes President of the European Parliament, and once more for the memory of Holocaust victims. Simone Veil was the first president for the Foundation of the Memory of Holocaust Victims in France. All 3 of those major themes in her life will be addressed during the ceremony. Afterwards, President Emmanuel Macron will give a speech, and then he, his wife Brigitte, and the 2 remaining sons of Simone and Antoine Veil will go inside the Panthéon for the ceremony. The ceremony appears to be starting now, as you can hear behind me.
Yeah, let's just listen in for one moment and see what's being said there at the Panthéon. Let's bring up the pictures for you, because it seems like everyone's about to sit down as that ceremony gets started at the Panthéon, honouring the life of Simone Veil. That is the scene on a hot summer's day here in Paris. It's, of course, the 1st of July, extremely warm temperatures. Even a couple of hours ago, it was pretty warm out there. So they're sitting under a hot sun, and we're seeing here pictures of some of the leading figures in French politics arriving at that ceremony. We're awaiting the President, Emmanuel Macron, and his wife, Brigitte. They're expected any minute now as the coffins are taken up that carpet, that blue carpet that Anke was just mentioning, to the mausoleum at the Panthéon. Here with me in the studio, I'm joined by Anne Macy, Chief Executive of the Confrontations Europe think tank, and I'm also joined by Sophie Janinet, who's an independent journalist, author, and member of the Georgette Sand Collective. Thank you to you both for joining us. I'm just wondering whether either of you has a moment in Simone Veil's life, or a speech that she gave, that really stands out for you, something that makes you, brought perhaps some inspiration to you in your youth. Is there anything for either of you?
Honestly, I would like to say something original, but what made her an icon is this speech that she gave in front of the Parliament for the Veil law. I think we've all seen it, and that's what makes her an icon, such as great as she is for everyone. That's why, nowadays, I don't know if you've seen in the street of Paris, but you have posters that says, "Thank you, Simone," in French, obviously. They are massive and they're colorful, and you can see her face. And when it was discovered that the 3 girls who are doing this are between 26 and 28, I think, people were astonished because they're so young, and compared to the symbol that is Simone Veil, that's what they were explaining. No, they don't know everything about her life, but they know, we all know, this great speech that she gave, and that was such a proof of strength, and that gave us so much rights, because having the possibility to get an abortion in France is so liberating. as a woman, the possibility to decide what to do with your own body is not a luxury, it's really important. And so because of this great speech, she will always remain an icon.
What about you, Anne? Was there anything she said or anything about her life that brought particular inspiration to you, in particular in your career?
I shared what you just said, but I would like to add as well. She has been the first woman president of the European Parliament, and she has been also the first president of the first parliament elected at direct universal suffrage. And during her first discourse, she showed how she's a symbol of this reconciliation of French and German. And she also demonstrated how, this is the first time in history, a historic step towards the completion of Europe, that despite our history of mutual destruction, where we were pitted one against the other, we have been able, all the people of Europe have been able to elect their delegates to the same assembly. And I think this means a lot to us.
Yes.
And as a woman, it's extremely symbolic, isn't it, that she's being buried in the Panthéon and her husband is being buried there by virtue of the fact that he is the husband of. And that's a big reversal in terms of, it's a sign of the times, isn't it, perhaps, that roles are indeed becoming more equal here in France.
Yes, that's why when you mentioned earlier the fact that it was an obvious choice that the fact that she entered the Panthéon, that she was chosen, wasn't subject to debates between the left and the right and all of this. That's exactly what I thought. I thought, look, considering everything she's done, because we've been talking about it since the beginning of this live broadcast, about her political career, her law career, her career as a public figure, as an icon. She's been doing so much. If a man had done half of what she did, it wouldn't even be a question. Of course he would have been buried in the Panthéon. Yes, it's great. It's a good symbol for our time that Simone Veil is finally, not finally, but that she's entering the Panthéon in this way that is finally, without question, without a doubt, that's what's supposed to be. And obviously the fact that her husband is buried with her by virtue, as you said, is a great thing. And we're hoping that it's just the beginning of a series of women entering the Panthéon. As you said, the discrepancy between the number of men and women in there is quite appalling. And also, of course, there are great men that we all remember today, like Victor Hugo, who are buried in the Panthéon, but there are also a lot of men who were buried under Napoleon that we don't even remember. And it's time for new people, for new women to be entering this great building of our nation.
Let me just ask you, we were talking there, and actually Sophie brought it up, this thank you Simone campaign that we've seen across Paris, people putting up posters, young people especially, as we were saying. What do you think specifically they were saying thank you for? What do you think it was?
I think it was thank you, lots of them, because she has largely contributed to the future that we have today. Many people say, look, the old narrative of Europe doesn't hold. People have all turned Eurosceptic. But at the end of the day, people know that we have been experiencing an extraordinary peace, time of peace, that if we are able to cooperate and if the voice of Europe is heard in the current world, that is a troubled world, she has played a role in that achievement.
I agree, and I also agree to the fact that, to a certain extent, in the younger generation, thanks to the Erasmus program, and because a lot of us are concerned about what's going to happen next, I think that there is a wave of fighting Euroscepticism. I think there is a wave of young people having met all type of nationality all across Europe, and who wants to strengthen this link. Of course, we will see what the European election coming up will show us in a matter of participation, voting-wise, but I think that she is a symbol for that as well.
What do you think Simone Veil would make of the situation in Europe right now. Of course, she died exactly a year ago. I think it's fair to say that in these last 12 months, Europe has entered what we might call a bit of a crisis moment in its existence. We've had summits which we've described as being make or break summits for the very survival of the European Union. What do you think Simone Veil's message as such a key figure in the European project would be about where we are right now?
I think she would be concerned. She would be deeply concerned. In less than 1 year, we will have elections at the European Parliament. And it is not excluded that Eurosceptic or even Europhobes win greater strength or even a majority there. And in this parliament, which is now as strong, as important as the Council of Ministers, because it has gained greater powers. And today, in all countries in Europe, there are politicians that play with the fears and hatred. They have pushed migrations on top of the European agenda. And some of them are mixing everything up deliberately. Political refugees that we must welcome in Europe because they flee the wars and persecutions, and economic migrants that we cannot take. We cannot take them all. So it is really troubled times.
Indeed.
And look, we should recall what Karl Marx was saying. He was saying that history does not repeat itself; it stutters.
Okay, well, we'll leave you with that thought for one moment. We're going to go back to the Panthéon and speak very quickly to Anke Uhle, because, Anke, we're about 90 seconds away from the start of the ceremony. The President should be arriving pretty shortly. What's the mood like now?
Well, the mood, Tom, like I said, there were a lot of children here, and so they were all getting very excited when cameras come by to film them, so they were screaming and laughing. Now I can see that it's getting a bit quiet, so I think everybody knows the ceremony is about to start. Like I said earlier, there are people of all ages here, so there are young, old, coming from all around France, and some people even from outside of France who are coming here for the ceremony specifically because Simone Veil meant so much to them and their lives. So I think you really feel a lot of admiration from the people that I've spoken to of this great woman of France who will now be commemorated in the Panthéon. I think everybody who's here obviously is very happy that she is commemorated in this way at the Panthéon. The president is set to give a speech sort of outlining her life and her achievements and what she meant to France and all of French people. So ambiance, very much admiration and respect for this great woman.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Anke Uhle. As we've been saying, we're just less than a minute away from the start of that ceremony. Let's take you to our full screen pictures of the scene at the Panthéon, where preparations, of course, have been underway for several days now. That is the scene of the avenue leading up to the Panthéon, where you can see the coffins of Simone Veil and that of her husband Antoine. Those will be carried up that blue carpet. That ceremony is just getting started. Let's listen in for a moment. That is the scene at the Panthéon right now. We've been listening there to the cellist Sonia Wiede-Atherton playing a song in remembrance of Schubert. This as the coffins of Simone Veil and that of her husband Antoine are carried on their final journey up that blue carpet towards the Panthéon, where the President of the French Republic, Emmanuel Macron, and his wife Brigitte, will be presiding at that ceremony. They'll be delivering an address very shortly as just after the Garde Républicain, the French National Guard, carrying those coffins draped in the tricolore, the French flag, up to the Panthéon. That is the scene. Let's listen in.
Née et élevée au sein d'une famille française de longue date, j'étais française sans avoir à me poser de questions. Mais être juive, qu'est-ce que cela signifiait pour moi comme pour
What
mes
does
parents?
being a Jew
Et
mean?
alors qu'agnostique, comme l'étaient
I
déjà mes
am
grands-parents,
agnostic,
la religion
as
était
my
totalement absente
grandparents
de
were.
notre foyer
Religion
familial.
was completely absent from our
De mon
family
père,
life.
j'ai surtout retenu
From
que son
my
appartenance
father,
à la judéité
I
était liée
retained
au savoir et à la
that
culture
his
que les
link
gens
with
du
Jewishness
siècle
had to do
ont
with
été
knowledge
forts
and
pour y avec
culture.
Ils étaient demeurés le peuple du livre.
He remained of the book, a people of the book, a member of the people of the book.
Pour ma mère,
For
il
my
s'agissait
mother,
davantage
it
d'un
was
attachement aux valeurs
more
pour lesquelles, au cours
an
de leur
attachment
longue et tragique
to
histoire,
certain
les Juifs
values
cessaient de lutter.
and the
La
tragedy
tolérance,
for which
le respect du droit de
the
chacun et de toutes
Jewish
les
people have
identités,
always
la
fought
solidarité.
tolerance, solidarity.
Tous deux sont morts en
All,
déportation,
both of them
laissant pour seul
died
héritage ces
in
valeurs humanistes
deportation.
que pour eux le judaïsme incarnait. De cet héritage, il ne m'est pas
From
possible
this
de dissocier le
heritage,
souvenir sans cesse
I
présent,
cannot separate
obsédant
the
même les
memories
6 millions de Juifs
of
exterminés
the 6
pour la
million
seule
Jews
raison.
exterminated simply for being
6 millions
Jews.
dont furent mes
6
parents,
million,
mon
including
frère,
my
et nombre de
parents,
mes proches.
my brother, and many
Je ne
other
peux me séparer d'eux.
of my
Cela
close
suffit pour que
friends
jusqu'à ma mort,
and family
la
members.
judéité soit imprégnée.
And I can never forget them, of
Le
course.
Kaddish sera dit sur ma tombe.
The Kaddish will be read on my tomb.
There we just heard the voice of Simone Veil, the former health minister of France, a women's rights icon, Holocaust survivor, speaking there as she recalled her life. And we're listening now to the quartet led by Sonia Wiede-Atherton on the cello, playing pieces of music there as the coffins are brought up that blue carpet towards the Panthéon. The colour of blue chosen, of course, because of her attachment to the European project and European unity. Also, it is the colour of peace and that of the United Nations. A hot sun in Paris today beating down on those people present in the audience for that memorial as Simone Veil and her husband make their final journey to the Panthéon, where she will become the 5th woman ever to be entombed at that monument. The coffins are being carried by members of the French National Guard. The French President Emmanuel Macron will address the congregation in the next half an hour or so. That'll be at 11:30 French time, so that's in about 22 or so minutes from now. Meanwhile, there are going to be various pieces of music played, symbolic pieces of music that are relevant to the life of Simone Veil. And we also, as I said, heard an extract of her voice, an extract from a documentary which was filmed some years back. Let's listen in to what's happening there in the avenue leading up to the Panthéon. Okay, that is the scene in the boulevard leading up to the Panthéon, where the bodies of Simone Veil and that of her husband Antoine are being carried by members of the French Republican Guard. And they're stopping at various panels with photographs and short descriptions of key moments in the life of Simone Veil, describing her adolescence, her deportation. That is the scene. Let me just ask you, Anne, what goes through your mind when you see those scenes there?
Yeah, we've been listening to the magnificent sound of the cello as the main instrument there, and it is the symbol of woman. We've also seen the European flag, to which she dedicated her life. So I found that this sound, that is rather grave, imposed respect and admiration to everything she represented.
And what about you, Sophie?
I'm a bit moved at the moment. I think those images, this music, this is all very powerful, and hearing the sound of her voice telling herself about her attachment to a religion that she was, brought to the camp because of. It's all such a great feeling of admiration towards this woman who achieved so much with so many difficulties, and seeing this homage, all those people standing in the sun, burning sun, I'm presuming, because it's really, really warm in Paris right now. All those people standing in the sun doing this because they want to be part of this historical moment and want to, share their respect for this woman. Yeah, I'm really moved, honestly.
And we've seen also her matricule, at least this number that was written on her skin, and she said that even after the World War, it wasn't easy because she wanted to speak about it, and people didn't want to listen. And she compared to her sister, who was a resistant, and she was invited to give conferences, whereas people didn't really want to listen to what she had to say. And she also said that the Holocaust will always be with her all her life, and of course that we must never forget. And let's not forget that Marine Le Pen's father, she's the head of the extreme right wing in France, who will be one of the force, the political force running for the European Parliament, denied the existence of concentration camps.
It's amazingly well organized, this event, isn't it? Just looking at it, it's beautifully choreographed, almost to the sort of the final second. There's very few events like this, aren't there, in recent memory here in France? There's not much I can compare this to.
Well, I think that, no, of course, the Panthéon is a great symbol in the French civilization for centuries now. So when someone is entering this great building, this symbol of remembrance, memory, national memory, of course the ceremony has to be well thought of and well choreographed, and everybody know their place and when and how, and even the fact that they're stopping in front of signs saying about different steps of her life, everything is studied obviously, and that's what makes it moving as well. It's because I'm looking at it while I'm talking to you, and yeah, that's what makes it moving, because it was well thought of, well prepared, and it is meant to pay a great homage, I believe.
And it gives great credence, doesn't it, to the whole institution of the Panthéon, that there is this woman that everyone rallies around and that she is being entombed there. Because there are, as we've been saying, a lot of people entombed at the Panthéon that really don't mean much to you or me. There were people back in the days of Napoleon and military leaders that we've completely forgotten about. And
even a banker.
Even a banker.
Like, why would a banker? I mean, I don't even know. I just know under Napoleon, a banker was sent there. I'm confused.
Why not, if he has achieved great thing? The trouble is that we don't know about it.
But it hasn't been immortalized. But this brings a kind of a modern day relevance and credence to that institution of the Panthéon, and why it is once again perhaps being thought of as being a key place for great figures to be buried.
It also shows that we have a lot to change.
Indeed.
France remain really a machist country compared to other European countries. German people, Swedish people can testify about that. We need to change a lot.
A lot is changing, but as we've been saying, Simone Veil is only the 5th woman to be entombed there, and so clearly a lot still needs to change. For those of you just tuning in, that is the scene in the avenue leading up to the Panthéon, the cortege passing by banners, various photographs with excerpts and vignettes about the life of Simone Veil. A remarkable life. She died at the age of 89 last year. just listening there to the choir and the orchestra playing what is now the anthem of Europe, Beethoven's Ode to Joy, which was sung significantly by a 9-person choir, because there were 9 members, I should say, of the European Union, or the EEC as it was known back then, at the time of her presidency of the European Parliament. Very poignant, and of course, Anne, Europe, a key part of what Simone Veil is being remembered for.
Yeah, sure. Simone Veil, but also Emmanuel Macron. Yeah, there is some, we touch here a bit of the time that we are living. Emmanuel Macron chose also the European anthem when he was introduced as President of the Republic with the Pyramid of the Louvre. And this European anthem just gives a little bit of hope in a context that was rather solemn with the young people, and it reminds us that, of course, peace is fragile. Of course, liberty, we realize its value only when we don't have it anymore. That's what Simone Veil was saying. But she was also saying that we can only overcome the challenges and seize the opportunities that are coming through the European dimension. So Europe, it's not just about bloody history and solemnity, it's about hope as well.
Yeah, indeed. Europe needs some optimism right now. A very different Europe to the Europe that Simone Veil knew back in those days when she was president of the European Parliament, 1979 to 1982. And that is, of course, why, as we've been saying, there were 9 choristers singing the Ode to Joy. The cortege is now passing past various other panels recalling the life of Simone Veil. We're now talking about her at her time of being a woman in the French government of great note, une femme de l'État, and also when she became active in the Shoah Memorial, the Holocaust Memorial here in France. She was president of a reconciliation group for the Holocaust and a memorial group for the Holocaust, something that obviously remained extremely important to her for the rest of her life after her experience in the camps. And
you mentioned, yeah, that Europe right now is very different from the Europe at that time. And of course, we've welcomed so many countries since then. Countries that have come into Europe to leave dictatorship behind them. For example, Spain, Portugal or Greece, or all the countries that were under the communists' rule for so many years. So since then, there has been this reconciliation between East and West. So we've welcomed the people from Central Europe, from Eastern Europe as well. And maybe in France, we haven't done everything we could or should to welcome them, to get to know them, open to their culture, and welcome them with all the respect and consideration that we should.
Because Simone Veil, better than anyone in the world, knew the horrors that a disunited Europe and dictatorship and fascism could actually bring to this continent. She experienced it firsthand, and indeed these are troubled times, as we've been saying, for the European Union and for Europe, and for people who doubt the European project. Perhaps this is a reminder of what the alternatives could be in a worst-case scenario, the horrors of disunity. Let's listen in to a choir now singing with sign language accompanying them. Let's listen in.
La fuite
Well, for benefit of those of you just tuning in, we're watching there the final journey of the coffins of Simone Veil and that of her husband Antoine. Simone Veil being given the rare honour of a burial at the Panthéon, making her the 5th woman ever to be buried at that monument. She will be laid to rest alongside her husband. She was, of course, as we've been saying, a Holocaust survivor, a women's rights icon, former health minister twice over, and one-time president of the European Parliament. And not only was she one of the most important figures of 20th century French politics, she was also one of France's most trusted public figures. And the coffins carrying the remains of Simone Veil and that of her husband have been stopping at various panels, key moments in her life. We've seen them stopping at their Les Justes de France, where a group of 22 choristers formed an arrow shape and sang their song, as well as had it performed with sign language. And there we're seeing the coffin go past Académicienne, and that was, of course, a reference to when Simone Veil entered the French National Academy in 2010. That's a language heritage academy which protects the French language. There are 2 more of these panels before the coffins reach the Panthéon itself, which, as you can see, is coming into vision. It's getting closer now as those 2 coffins go up that blue carpet, and we're expecting the French President Emmanuel Macron to arrive at the steps of the Panthéon very shortly indeed. And what was going through your mind? You wanted to just mention something about what's happening there right now.
Yeah, we saw a song, a remembrance of Les Justes de France and elsewhere. It was these people, men and women, who have hidden Jews or not said where they were when they knew. Some of them became famous, others were unknown, but that's something very important, just to show that our country, France, there has been collaboration with the German, with the Nazis. There have also been these people who have decided to resist their way.
Okay, we're just seeing there the coffins making the final journey towards what looks like it's going to be an outdoor ceremony at the steps of the Panthéon, where we gather the French president is going to give an address in the next couple of minutes, I think when this next piece of music comes to an end. That is the scene on a hot summer's day here in Paris. Thousands of people lined the route that the coffins took. The funeral cortege went from the Shoah Memorial in the 4th arrondissement of Paris at St. Paul through the Latin Quarter, and as we've seen, it's taken this long journey up that blue carpet towards the Panthéon, which will be the final resting place for Simone Veil and her husband Antoine. Here with me in the studio, I'm joined by Anne Macy, Chief Executive of the Confrontations Europe think tank, also Sophie Janinet, an independent journalist, author and member of the Georgette Sand Collective. And we've been saying all along that Simone Veil has been a heroine for many people here in France. Was she a heroine for you?
Yes, definitely. Look, I must admit that recently, as she was growing a bit older, her ideas changed a bit, and I was a bit sad to see that. But that's the only mention of this that I'm going to do today, because that's definitely not.
What do you mean by that? What changed about her perspectives? Did she say things that you didn't like? She wasn't
as strong, yes, but again, we're not going to spend too much time on this, but I'm really admirative, and she's really a heroine for me, especially during her entire career. She did things that we don't really speak about. I don't know if any of you here remember the law on parity, one of the first strong law on parity that was suggested, carried actually by Yvette Roudy in 1983. We were saying earlier that Simone Veil didn't choose between left or right. She was saying herself that she picked what she liked on both sides. Yvette Roudy was a socialist, and she still was a very good friend of hers, and she supported her when she offered a manifest to ask for this this law on parity, a law that was very, very modern at the time, just for the sake of showing how modern it was and how actual. The law mentioned that harassment shouldn't happen at work, and of course this part of the law was rejected in 1983. But she was at the Parliament, the European Parliament at the moment, Simone Veil, and she still was very much involved in the politics in France, and she was very supportive of this text that got passed in the Parliament. Also thanks to her. So yeah, she did so much.
A very active political career. Was it in the 1970s that she first became truly recognizable across France, or was she already, before she became health minister, quite a well-known figure, do you think, to the average French person? Or was it 74 that really changed everything?
Yeah, I don't know if you agree with me, but I definitely think 74 changed something. Before that, she was a well-known figure, really respected woman, but in the close circle of Paris intelligentsia, as we say. But let me
yeah, definitely. 74. Before that, she wasn't really known.
Yeah, not all across the country anyway.
Okay, let's just go back to what's happening there at the Panthéon, because it looks like the coffins are getting very close now to the Panthéon. We've seen a glimpse of the French President Emmanuel Macron, who will be delivering a speech very shortly, a long speech, 20 minutes or so, addressing that memorial at the Panthéon, and it looks as though he is indeed waiting at the cortege at the top of the steps there of the Panthéon, and the coffins will be placed on those two plinths at the bottom of the steps, and we gather that speech will get started very shortly indeed. Let's listen in to what they're saying. Well, if you're just joining us, that is the scene at the Panthéon in central Paris, where the coffins of Simone Veil and that of her husband have been put in place before they enter the Panthéon. The French President Emmanuel Macron will deliver an address we expect to take about 18 to 20 minutes. That is the scene. The French Republican Guard has just carried those coffins on a long blue carpet up to the Panthéon, stopping at various points where various key moments in the life of Simone Veil were remembered. Let's listen in to the French president who's about to start speaking.
Last July the 5th, when I announced that after the solemn tribute paid to Simone Veil in the Invalides, that she would one day be laid to rest in the Panthéon. This decision was not only my decision, it wasn't only the decision of her family, who agreed nevertheless. This decision was that of all French people. It is with great intensity what all French people wanted. Because France loves Simone Veil. France loves her for her just fights, her fights for justice, always necessary, always inspired by a great strength of character. France loves her even more because she understood where that strength came from, put at the service of a more dignified humanity. It is only rather late, when she was over 50, that France discovered that the roots of her engagement were rooted in insufferable pain in the camps of death. There, she found within herself the energy to survive, the deep, secret, inalienable strength, which we call dignity. That's where, in spite of the unhappiness, she was certain that humanity would overcome barbarity. All her life, she illustrated this invincible hope. We wanted that Simone Veil should be laid to rest in the Panthéon, so that her fight, her dignity, her hope remain a compass in these troubled times that we are experiencing. Because she experienced the worst aspects of the 20th century, and yet she fought to make the 20th century better. Simone Veil will be laid to rest with her husband in the 6th cellar of the Panthéon. She will be joining four great persons of our history: René Cassin, Jean Moulin, Jean Monnet, and André Malraux. They were, like her, the masters of hope. Like her, Simone Veil fought against prejudices, isolation, against the demons of resignation and indifference, without giving in, because she knew that it was the true spirit of France. Like them, she braved hostility, she acted as a precursor, she took up causes that we thought had been lost, to remain faithful to her idea of the Republic and of the hope that she placed in it. It is wonderful today that this woman should be joining the great people whose spirit and whose values she fully shared, and which she fought for throughout her life. Like René Cassin, Simone Veil fought for justice. In 1948, Cassin had the National Assembly, the General Assembly of the UN, adopt the human rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Simone Veil knew that in this noble fight for human rights, half of humanity continued to be forgotten: the women of this world. She had seen their submission, their humiliations, she herself had to confront inequalities that she deemed absurd, out of date. So she fought for justice to be given to women at all levels, justice for women held in unworthy conditions. When she was a magistrate, she fought to improve the conditions, to give women autonomy, financial equality, parental equality, justice for that their qualities and talents should be recognized and used in every field, for women who had suffered physically and mentally, for the women who had to hide their distress, whom she saved from their suffering with great strength. She had the law in favor of abortion adopted in France at the request, with the support of the President of the Republic, Giscard d'Estaing, and Prime Minister Jacques Chirac. Justice for women who were uncertain of their rights and position in society, women relegated by prejudices and bad laws. Justice for all those women across the world who were martyrized, raped, sold, mutilated. With Simone Veil enters those generations of women who made France without the nation ever recognizing this and granting them the freedom. Today, let us hope that through her, justice will be rendered to all of them. And when on this day our thoughts should go to one of those women, a woman of strength and resolute spirit in terrible conditions in the camps of death, supported everything. She would have loved to have had a lighter life, a freer life, but her tragic destiny was to add to the suffering until she was completely exhausted, and when she died. I would like to pay tribute here today to the memory of the mother of Simone Veil, Madame Yvonne Jacobi, born Steinmetz, née Steinmetz, who died in Bergen-Belsen in March 1945. Her example inspired Simone Veil's fight for women. Like Jean Monnet, Simone Veil fought for peace, and therefore for Europe. She had lived through the savagery and arbitrariness of the past, and she believed that only concord between peoples would allow freedom to flourish. She fought for peace. She fought for Europe. She wanted Europe out of a sense of realism rather than idealism, through experience, not for ideological reasons, because she was lucid and not naive. She didn't go in for technological complications often associated with Europe. She was of that generation for whom Europe was not a heritage nor a constraint, but a conquest, a daily conquest. As a parliamentarian, as President of the European Parliament, as a citizen, committed citizen, she kindled the flame and the founding spirit of Europe. Jean Monnet used to say that Europe would be the sum of solutions to be brought to the crisis. We owe to Simone Veil that she did not allow the doubts and crises of Europe reduce the victory that we have won over divisions of the past. Nothing would be worse than to renounce the hope that gave birth to Europe after the ruins of world wars and in which Europe could have perished. We are today the heirs of this challenge to the great old nations. This challenge is our challenge, that of the youth of France and of Europe. At a time when trouble, negative winds, headwinds are with us, we have to remember this. Like André Malraux, Simone Veil fought for civilization. Born before the war in a civilization that thought it was immortal, she saw its collapse and cruel consequences. She experienced the disappearance of moral values, and she saw women and children martyrized in camps before some of them were able to go home and be reunited with their families. She knew she had suffered physically, that Auschwitz had upset the very idea of civilization. She shared with Malraux the sad observation that manhood, that humanity had lost a lot of its significance, but she knew also that we could rebuild the civilization, a new civilization. Art and literature. She loved art and literature. She continued to believe that culture heightens man and sheds light on the life. She will lie close to her master, Jean Racine. Her father, Henri Jacob, had given her this love of Jean Racine, who is buried in the church of Saint-Étienne-du-Mont, and she succeeded him in the Académie Française. Working for education, the rehabilitation of prisoners, or as a minister for the protection of the weakest members of society, she knew that civilizations can survive if thousands of actions are taken. Committed to friendship among European peoples, she engaged also. She fostered dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians because she knew that peace can't stop at the border. She believed in a joint destiny, a common destiny which we call nation, and in the exciting adventure which we call civilization. She knew that every day is a new fight against barbarity. Like Jean Moulin, Simone Veil fought for France to remain faithful to itself. Betrayed by a French state that was an accomplice with the Nazi occupants, she shared its sufferings. When she decided to bear witness of her deportation, it was first and foremost to pay tribute to the just citizens of France. She rose up and fought against those who portrayed France, won by anti-Semitic deliriums of Hitler, Laval and Pétain, to remind the incredible courage of French families which at the peril of their life had hidden Jewish children, had saved them from persecution and an atrocious death. She reminded people of the times when the French gave to their French fellow citizens false papers and work papers, when the Archbishop of Toulouse, Monseigneur Salier, called for the Church and the Protestants to support people, to show solidarity and to fight against the occupation and to show fraternity amongst all French people. To the left of cellar number 6, on the walls of the crypt, are written the following words: "Le just." At that time, France remained France because men and women and children gave up everything to fight in the resistance. General de Gaulle charged Jean Moulin with the organization of the resistance. It is for that France, for the real France, against the France that had been disfigured by collaborators who continued to defend the crimes that Simone Veil decided to bear witness against. France, thanks to her and a few others, looked at what France didn't want to see, what France didn't want to hear, which France wanted to forget, and yet was part of her heritage. She understood that the nation cannot redoubt the memories of its children, and it had to confront them. Never Simone Veil accepted a decoration, a medal, and she did not countenance any rivalry of memories. The realities of the extermination camps, the crimes, the instruments of the crimes against humanity do not in any way diminish the bravery of the resistance. But there is the truth. The truth of Jewish martyrdom is part of French history, as it does the French resistance movement. Simone Veil will lie next to Jean Moulin, the hero of the French resistance, who was tortured by Classe Barbie and to whom he revealed no secrecy in spite of torture. She, Simone Veil, martyrized by the SS, never gave up her dignity. They are, for us, two examples of deep humanity. He, heroic in his sacrifice; she, admirable through her courage and bearing witness. She, on the left hand, on the left arm, had the number of deportees to Birkenau. One day, a French person asked her if it was the cloakroom number. 78600 was the witness of her intact strength of character, and it will be engraved in her sarcophagus as it had been engraved in her skin when she was a teenager. Finally, the memories of the deportees, the 77,500 Jews and Gypsies who were deported from France and who will be remembered through her presence in this building. Tomorrow, she will be joining the 4 French knights who rest in this building. When she enters, she will look proudly at them with a tint of concern. She will be able to say, "I did my bit." She will be welcomed on an equal footing by the members of a family united by the same courage, what we call French heroes. They call on us also to do our bit. Another knight will have joined them, a fervent knight. It was unthinkable to separate two persons who life had brought together in joy, but also in the terrible suffering with the loss of Simone Veil's sister, Madeleine. She had survived the camps, but was killed in a car accident. The death of her son, Claude Nicolas, who died in 2002 of a heart attack. It was unthinkable for Simone Veil to lay here without Antoine, her husband. Antoine, the senior civil servant who brought to the survivor of the camps the humor and elegance that enabled her to start living again. He started his political career as a European liberal, and then he understood that his wife would bring to politics not simply a desire to change things, but the will to fight for what is essential. So he then put his talent, his love of her, at the service of Simone's battles. He supported her through the most difficult times when her adversaries, her enemies, were threatening her and insulting her. Their dialogue never ceased. They laughed together, they cried together, and they were supported by three sons, Jean-Claude and Pierre-François, and soon 12 grandchildren. This dialogue was interrupted only by Antoine's death in 2013. He seemed to live forever, that he would live forever. He had such a great love of life. The Panthéon will from now on be full of the murmurs of their conversation. Your work, Madame, was great because it was nourished by your pains and suffering, your intransigence, your faithfulness, but also because you dedicated it entirely to France and the Republic. Everything that you did so because the Republic called you to do so, led you to do so, encouraged you to do so. You believed in the Republic, and the Republic believed in you. The grandeur of one contributed to the grandeur of the other. Out of all your strength, with all your strength, you honored the Republic, and that's why the Republic honors you today. Your work, however, is not over. It enters history and posterity. We hope that your fights will continue and inspire our youth and bring together the people of France. Let's unceasingly show ourselves worthy as citizens, as a people, of the risks that you took and the paths and the directions that you have indicated. It is through those risks and through those directions that France is truly France. At the end of your life, you wished that a Kaddish should be said on your tomb. Your wish has been satisfied. It was done so in 2017 in Montparnasse Cemetery. Today, France will offer you another song, the song sung by the prisoners of Ravensbrück, whose words they engraved, and they sang it on the 14th of July 1944 in front of the SS troops. This song, which the deportees, each in their own language, sang when their camp was finally liberated, because by then they knew it all by heart. This song, the whole world heard it when the barbarity again showed its hideous face. This song is that of the Republic, that of France, the France we love, and which you have made greater and stronger. Let it be the song of our gratitude and the nation's recognition by the nation that served you so much and loved you so much. This song is the Marseillaise. Long live the Republic. Long live France.
L'aube, à Birkenau, 17 juin 2018.
Dawn.
5 heures du matin.
5 o'clock in the morning, 2018.
Okay, and that was a minute's silence for Simone Veil. Before that, a recording entitled The Silence of the Camps of Auschwitz and Birkenau. That was recorded by David Teboul. And before that, a speech given by the French President Emmanuel Macron, who addressed that memorial for Simone Veil as her coffin and that of her husband are now due to be carried up the steps into the Panthéon, where they're going to be entombed on Monday. Well, the president began his address by saying that the decision to give Simone Veil this honour of a burial at the Panthéon was the decision of the French people, because, he said, the French people love Simone Veil. The president then talked about her life and times. He talks about her experiences and the witness of the collapse of civilization and her own deportation, which he said is a reminder to all of us during these troubled times here in Europe. Well, Simone Veil died exactly 1 year ago at the age of 89, and she becomes the 5th woman ever to be buried at that monument. Let's cross now to our correspondent Anka Ula, who is standing by for us at the Panthéon. A long and poignant address given by the French president. What stood out for you?
Well, yeah, that's true. Very dignified celebration of Simone Veil's life before that speech that we heard from Emmanuel Macron. There are a few points where I did hear the crowd go wild, really, with applause. One was during the part about her fight for women's rights. Emmanuel Macron saying that she was fighting for women at a time when women were forgotten. They were the half of the population that was not spoken about, and she was their voice at that point. Another time that people applauded here was when he talked about her unbreakable dignity. Simone Veil obviously has had a lot of tragedy befall her in her life. She lost her family in the Holocaust. She was in the concentration camps, only made it out with her sister. Her son died of a heart attack before she did. A lot of tragedy, and she made it out of that tragedy, and really represents being able to choose your own destiny and create, not let your circumstances define you, but really becoming who you want to be and choosing the life you want to live. A lot of the people in the crowds I saw were wiping away tears, some of them very moved. Many people came here from across France, from outside of France, because Simone Veil meant a lot to them personally. That's one thing that's very interesting about Simone Veil being commemorated here, is that she really is a modern figure in French history. So she speaks to a lot of people in contemporary France.
Yeah, indeed she does, and that was very much the opening message the French president gave as he began that address, saying indeed she was loved by the French people. Let's just take you back to the steps of the Panthéon, because we can see there the two coffins there draped in the French flag are due to be carried up those stairs by the French National Guard. We then understand that the family of Simone Veil and the French President Emmanuel Macron and the First Lady will follow the guard as they carry these coffins up the steps. That's happening right now. Let's just listen in as that happens. That is the scene at the Panthéon where the coffins carrying the remains of Simone Veil and that of her husband have just been placed on a pedestal in front of a piece of artwork produced by a French documentary maker called David Teboul. The French National Guard carried those two coffins in and placed them on pedestals, accompanied by the family of Simone Veil and also by the French President Emmanuel Macron and the First Lady. That is bringing to an end the ceremony there at the Panthéon, and we heard the French president delivering a long and emotional address just before the coffins were taken into the Panthéon itself. Well, here with me in the studio, I'm joined by Anne Macy, Chief Executive of the Confrontations Europe think tank. Thank you again for bearing with us. Also, Sophie Janinet, independent journalist and author, and also member of the Georgette Sand Collective. Thank you to you both. I just want to pick up on what we were saying earlier about the speech that was given by the French president, because I think the message he wanted to get across was that the message and the symbolism of Simone Veil's life is perhaps more relevant right now than at any other moment.
Yeah, probably. She couldn't stand the suffering. She couldn't stand humiliation. And she was able to find the strength in herself to have this, as Emmanuel Macron puts it, invincible hope that humanity will fight and overcome barbarity. And this is something very strong. He called Jean Monnet, who fought for peace, therefore for Europe, just like Simone Veil. He called also André Malraux, who fought for civilization. And here, he didn't say that, but the 60 last years of Europe have already been an awakening of a civilization that had sunk. He called also Jean Moulin as the real France and not the disfigured France that France don't want to see. So there are here lots of messages for the current times, some form of a compass in the times that we are experiencing. And something very important also about Europe, the way, as President of the European Parliament, she saw it. She wanted a Europe with a sense of realities, not idealism. She was a Euro realist, not a Euro naive. And maybe even more important, she cared for the people. She cared for the concrete lives of the people, of the European people, but also of the people of the world. As President of the European Parliament, she fought when the only prerogative of the European Parliament at that time was the vote of the budget. She fought to give a little bit more help to a dramatic problem of hunger in the world, in Africa. And at that time, even her own government resisted and said no, but she won, she resisted. And that way she was able to strengthen democracy, democratic control within the European Parliament, and also win the respect and admiration of all. She cared for not just the people of Europe, but the people of the world. And she also knew that what is key to that is to convince public opinion in developed countries. So she thought that the European Parliament had a role also to raise awareness, because we are not just caring about the suffering of the people, we are caring also for the stability of the world.
And it's very important to talk about all this, especially right now, where Europe, the European Union, should be at the forefront of a movement to make this world more human, because that's how this union was built. And I think that we are missing Simone Veil a lot at the moment, because she would be very interested to give her an input and also to move forward the entire union towards accepting immigration, being more human in their policies, as you mentioned earlier.
What stood out for you when listening to the French president giving that address just now? What did you think were the most important messages that will stick with you?
Well, first I want to say that as a French citizen, I am quite proud that our president is so literate. It's not the case of all the presidents over the world at the moment. So it's quite lucky for us that, on a literate point of view, that this president can uphold to the level of such a great intellectual as she was.
How do you mean? What was an example of how did that manifest itself? Do you think in the speech?
It's just the
delivery, the content.
Exactly. He has a very good way to pick quotes and to build his sentences and to pay respect. Everything is very well put. He
strikes the right tone. You're saying.
Yes, exactly what I mean. As you may know, Simone Veil and her husband were gathering intellectual at their apartment back then. They were calling it the Vauban Talk Discussion Group or something. So she was really about words and debates, and that was her way for her to think and to think forward by alimenting her thoughts with other people. So the fact that Emmanuel Macron is literate is this very smart individual, and I'm very happy that the president chosen to enter her in the Panthéon was to the level of what she deserved.
And what about the content in terms of really drawing parallels between the troubled times and the horrific times that Simone Veil knew, and what's happening in the world right now, particularly here in Europe, where there is a lot of uncertainty about the cohesion of the bloc, shall we say, at this particular moment?
Yes, well, now, first I started to say what I thought about the tone, but yes, the speech is great, as all of Emmanuel Macron's speech is very good at this, but now I wouldn't pay too much attention to what's behind those words, especially since we are talking today about Simone Veil, who was, again, such a feminist despite herself, but such a feminist and such a European. She was very important for those very two subjects. And Emmanuel Macron himself is very great, has given great speech about saying that feminism, like women in general, are at the center of the policies of this government, and he's also very good at saying that European Union should be stronger, and it's very good that he's taking this role, especially after Brexit and the immigration crisis, but I still think that he could do more, and the parental leave suggestion that was made at the Parliament is just an example.
Okay, well, Sophie Janine, you have had the last word, because that brings us to an end. Thank you very much indeed to you, Sophie Janine, independent journalist, author and member of the Georgette Sand Collective. Thank you to you as well, Anne Macy, Chief Executive of the Confrontations Europe think tank. Thank you so much. Thank you to you for watching. This special coverage of Simone Veil's burial here on France 24 now comes to an end. There's lots more about today's events, as well as Simone Veil's life and legacy on our website, france24.com, where you'll find reports and articles, as well as video about Simone Veil. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.
Sur France 24, la nuit, on est très fiers d'accompagner les Amériques dans leurs soirées, de voir l'Asie se réveiller, et on est là